go or get started. And if we need to restart, we certainly can do that. But since I would imagine some people are here joining us and we have all of our speakers and storytellers here, I think we'll get started. So I'm Representative Vikki Goodwin, for those of you who don't know me already. I am good friends with a couple of ladies who introduced me to a workshop that was going on at the Austin Presbyterian Theological Seminary back in January. That workshop was called 5 Myths About Immigration. And during that workshop, I was given a postcard and an introduction to this undocumented story telling project. And so I thought it would be a great way for people to hear stories firsthand from immigrants, hear their struggles and their successes, and just have a better idea of what it means when we're talking about immigration. It's gotten to be a very politicized issue, but I think if you hear stories of individuals who've lived through it, maybe that will change people's perspective. So that's my hope, and I'm going to let Monica take it away. But first, let me introduce Monica. Tourneau was born and raised in Guatemala. She works in theological education, and she's a Christian artist and activist for Latino immigrant rights. Monica works at Austin Presbyterian Theological Seminary, where she leads 2 projects involving Latino communities. One is Instituto Maria y Marta, a certificate program in Christian leadership for Latina women, and the Undocumented Stories project that educates people about immigration through storytelling events and workshops, which is what we're doing now. So Monica, I will let you take it away.
So good evening, and thank you all for joining us here tonight. Like Representative Vikki Goodwin said, my name is Monica Tourneau, and I lead this project called Undocumented Stories, which is an educational outreach of education beyond the walls at Austin Presbyterian Theological Seminary. And the purpose of this project is to educate people about immigration through storytelling events and workshops. And why storytelling? Because stories have power. They don't tell us what to think, but they have the power to make us feel. Stories have the power to go straight to a listener's heart, to break down walls and stereotypes. Through storytelling, we can overcome our differences, lower our defenses, and increase our understanding. And that's what we want to accomplish here tonight with these 5 powerful stories. And before we begin, I want to thank State Representative Vikki Goodwin for hosting us and providing a platform to have our voices be heard.
You're welcome.
We have 5 storytellers tonight, and 5 stories that are powerful. Our first storyteller is Claudia Munoz. Claudia is a leader in the Austin community and is a director of a very well-known immigration and criminal justice organization. And I'm not gonna say anything else because I'm gonna let Claudia speak for herself. So let's welcome Claudia.
Hi everyone, thank you so much for having me. I am really excited to be here and be sharing my story with you. My name is Claudia Munoz. I was born and raised in Monterrey, Mexico. Monterrey is a town that's about 7 hours from Austin by bus, and it is not a border town necessarily, but we do behave like one, very much so. And I am the youngest of 9. My mother was born and raised in a small town called Montemorelos. They're famous there for oranges. And my mom comes from a family of farmers. That's what they did. And my father is from San Luis Potosí. My parents, both of them, grew up in rural areas, very poor. My mother actually did not know how to read and write until she was 45 years old. We actually went to elementary school together. When I was going to school, that's when my mother also learned how to read and write. And for a long time, you know, I didn't see how hard it had been for my mother growing up in that environment and, you know, being the mother of 9 children. In a salary that was not enough to provide for all of us, and being, you know, not having access to school. But she worked very hard. From a very young age, she taught me the value of labor, of working the land. And she's a very, very strong woman that I respect a lot and to whom I owe everything that I am. I will say that I grew up in a pretty abusive environment. My father drank a lot. He was an alcoholic. And to this day, I'm not sure how my mother managed to feed all of us and to, continue to provide for all of us. When I was 15 years old, my mother had a brain aneurysm and she had to go to the hospital. She had brain surgery. She was very ill. We all thought that she was going to die. She miraculously made it. And at that point in Mexico, this was 1999, 2000, the drug cartels had begun to take over the area in Mexico, the Monterrey, where I am from. And so our house was broken into constantly. My sister, who worked as a graphic designer, her business was broken into constantly, and life became really unbearable. And as my mother, was recuperating from the hospital, we knew that we couldn't really stay there and be safe and be able to support my mother. And so my sister actually came to the United States, and I did not want to stay in my house because my mother couldn't really take care of me anymore, and I was going to be left at the mercy of my father, who had been abusive and abused me from a very young age. And so my sister brought me with her. Unfortunately, I had just turned 16, so I was not eligible for the For Action for Childhood Arrivals. I arrived about 2 weeks after I turned 16 years old. But I really wanted to study. I really loved school and learning, and I knew that I wanted to study because my mother did not have access to school. She always wanted her children to do that. So she worked very hard. She was a seamstress and just did all types of jobs. She was a street market vendor, to be able to provide for us again, because my father, even though he worked, he was a, functioning alcoholic. We didn't have enough money, but my mother worked really hard to make that happen. And so I knew and valued education and access to an education. My mother made sure that I did that. So when I came to the United States, I started attending Lanier High School. My sister made sure that, she had 2 jobs, and she told me, I don't want you to have the same life that I had. And so I want you to have a better life. So I'm going to work 2 jobs, and I'm going to make sure that you're able to attend school. And so I enrolled at Lanier High School, and it was very hard at first. I was 16 years old. I did not speak any English, and it was high school, which was a new culture for me to get used to. So, but my sister was working very hard, and I felt a commitment to her to stay in school, to learn, to do everything I could. And so what I will do is that my sister, because she worked at the newspaper, she worked delivery in the newspaper from 2 a.m. to 7 a.m. Then she came home, she took a nap, and went to her next job at 9 a.m. Until 5 or 6 p.m. And that was the same routine that she did about 6 days per week. Mm-hmm. So what I will do is that I will go to school. And then after school, I would wait for my sister to get out of work, and I would go to Walnut Creek Elementary, which is on Lamar Boulevard. And so I would stay there and just study English. So I learned English in about 3 months. I was able to, get out of ESL classes pretty quickly. That's all that I did, just study and read. And it was really amazing to be able to learn a new language and communicate and try to, make friends and navigate this new world that I was part of now. And so when I was in high school, I was part of the dance team. I tried to join extracurricular activities and do everything I could to stay engaged and make my sister really proud. My senior year was really difficult. That was 2004. And in 2001, House Bill 1403 had passed, and I was able to attend college thanks to having access to in-state tuition through House Bill 1403. I am really, really grateful to this day. I attended Prairie View A&M University, which is a historically Black college right outside of Houston. And attending that school really opened my eyes to injustice in the United States. Prairie View, it's 90, at that point it was 98% African American. And well, for me, it was a little bit of a culture shock going from, I had just arrived from Mexico 3 years prior, and then I lived in Austin, and then I went to Prairie View. It was also just an awakening to racial relationships and, like to race and class in the United States. At that point, I had been really involved with the youth immigrant rights movement and access to education. But going to Prairie View really influenced and informed my view of the system as a whole, right? So issues of poverty and inequity, mass incarceration, these were all things that my professors at Prairie View were talking about, because they were the things that, were relevant to the lives of students at Prairie View every day. And so in 2007, I had an internship in New Orleans. It was 2 years after Katrina, and I went there to teach ESL classes to many of the undocumented workers that were coming to New Orleans to rebuild the city. And I also got to work in the case of the Jena 6, which was a group of 6 youth in Jena, Louisiana, that had been unfairly incarcerated. And ever since then, I have continued to work on issues of criminal justice and immigration. In 2011, my nephew was arrested and almost deported. He was for about a month in Pearsall, the Pearsall Detention Center, and my nephew had been here since he was about 4 years old. My family worked really hard. He had a $15,000 bond that we had to get the money to get him out in about 3 or 4 days, and it was really hard for my family. But after that, we really, as a family, made a commitment to continue fighting for, to support immigrants everywhere. And I have done that work since then. Again, for me, doing that work in Austin is very rewarding. Austin is my home. My family has been here for almost 20 years now. And we love our home. We were driven from our home once. And sometimes, when Senate Bill 4, as before, passed in 2017, we saw many of our close family members move or self-deport. And my family had a conversation about that, and it was really hard, but we felt really strongly, right, that we weren't going to be driven from our home, and that we were going to stay here and fight for our right to be here and to be part of this community. And we have done that since then. It has been hard, we see people moving to places like Bastrop and Williamson, where enforcement and where the sheriffs are much it's much more harsh than here in Austin. And so that has been really hard to see. I actually came to work at Grassroots Leadership in September of 2017, which was a few months after Senate Bill 4 passed. And part of it, I was inspired to continue doing this work because I didn't want to see other people being driven from their home as well. And I have been working there since then. I started there as an immigration programs director. And I am myself formally detained, and I am currently in deportation proceedings. So I have a court hearing coming up later this year. But this is my passion, and I continue to do detention work and do work around the jail and just, support people through these processes. I think during this pandemic, we have seen how hard the community has been hit. We at Grassroots have a hotline, and we get phone calls from people every day asking for support. People can't pay their rent and their utilities, and it's been really hard to see that on the communities that we work with. And so thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to tell my story. I'm really grateful to be in community with all of you, and I'm happy to be here and hopefully continue to be here for many years to come. Thank you.
So can I ask a couple of questions, or do you want to go straight on to the next one? Monica, I want to leave it up to you. Oh, you're muted. Hang on a sec. We need to unmute you. Okay, now. Oh, hold on. You're still muted. Can you do it? For some reason, it's not letting me unmute you. Monica, there you go.
Yes, okay, so I was saying questions at the end. Okay. I'm gonna introduce our second storyteller, is Elphega Torres. Elphega loves growing her own food. She loves gardening and is an excellent cook. Help me welcome Elfiga.
And she is on tape, right?
Yes, we recorded her story.
Okay, so I am going to share my screen. Let's see here. And here we go. Oh, sorry, hit the wrong button.
I can't hear her. Goodwin.
We can't hear her.
Yeah.
You can't hear her?
No.
No. It's weird.
Can you hear now?
No. I can try my computer. Give me just a minute.
Okay, I could hear hers, but you all couldn't hear.
No, that's so weird. I'm gonna pull it up on my computer.
Okay.
It'll take me just a minute.
Okay, sorry. Technical difficulties. So I'm going to stop sharing since Madeline's going to pull it up on hers.
We'll see.
I take a good look at my hands. They have so much to say. They're scratchy, some parts are bleeding, and in others, the skin has peeled off. I reach out for the bandage and I carefully rub each one of my fingers, trying to protect them and hoping they will heal soon. The gloves come next. I need to protect them every day. It still hurts, but I must keep going. My hands, what would I do without them? I was born in Mexico in a family of 13 brothers and sisters. I was the one in the middle, and because of my older siblings were male, I had to serve them while also care for the younger ones. As a woman in Mexico, born in a machismo family and context, that's how it is. As a woman, I had no voice. You do what you are told, and I had no choice but to obey my family. I used to love to go to school. I was very good at math. I even helped my father doing the numbers in his business. But at the young age of 11 years old, my parents took me out of school so that I could work in the house, taking care of my younger siblings, clean for my older ones, and to help my father with his business. I couldn't follow my dreams or my will, although my true desire was to continue in school. I loved going to school, and even though I had to do so many home chores, I tried to finish them quickly so that I could go to school. I had to wake up very early to do all this. I was just a child, but with all this workload, I was exposed from my childhood. When I was 14 years old, my parents put me for sale like an animal or an item, so they could have more money. I wanted to escape and planned to do it with the help of one of my father's workers. He was 30 years old and helped me to help me run away, but he tricked me and abused me for over 2.5 years. I live in constant fear. I have 2 children with him who grew up with nutrition problems, and finally I got the help from his sister to escape and leave him. I ran away and crossed illegally the border from Tijuana to California. I couldn't take my kids with me, and it scares me so much. I left them behind with my parents so that I could survive and make a living. I didn't want to leave them very long with them because I didn't want my kids to go through the same kind of abuse that I had gone through with my family. This was only temporary. My plan was to save up enough money so that actually I could bring them with me. Eventually, I could bring them with me. It was my opportunity to escape, to leave all my traumatic experiences, and all was behind me. Although the trauma followed me and still haunts me to this very day, trying to prevent me from sharing my story. When we got to the border of Tijuana, we tried to cross the border at nighttime. That's how you do it. But we got caught by the border patrol and put us in jail for a few hours, and then they bussed us to the border of Tijuana. Back in Tijuana, we tried a second time, and this time we made it. I was 17 when I set foot on California. My older sister was already there, and she helped me to find a job as a nanny and maid for an American family. I lived and worked in their home where I had to clean, cook, and nanny their 3 kids after school. The woman who hired me was a stay-home mom, and she was bored with herself. So she taught me how to play cards and drink beer with her. I was still a minor and was an underage for drinking alcohol. I was getting paid $50 for a full week of work without any breaks. I needed more money so I could save to bring my children from Mexico. So I asked one of my brothers if I could work with them in the agriculture work, just like them. They told me it was a hard work, and they were right. It was a difficult work, but I still prefer that to be a maid to that family. I moved in with my brothers. They rented out a parking garage and a home where we were living, the 4 of us, all together. We had no kitchen, no bathroom, but at least the landlord allowed us to come inside her house and use them. That's how you do it when you are undocumented. You live together, crowded in small spaces. Every day, I woke up early in the morning between 1 and 3 a.m. to make breakfast and lunch, burritos and tacos. We had to drive to different farms and wait for the time to start. It was a very difficult work to do. Drive far away, and the pay was miserable. And it's paid by what you collect. So if we wanted to earn more money, we had to work extra harder. We had no benefits, no restroom, no safety equipment. And for lunch, we had to set a fire to heat our food and sit down on the floor. Moreover, the agricultural work is seasonal. When it rains, there's no work, no money. All the workers in the field were immigrants, Latinos, most from Mexico. It was a hard work. I saw many workers suffer from heat stroke, dehydration, and they gave up. I started working as a picker lemons and oranges. They paid $14.50 for bean. I needed 16 bags, about 40 pounds of lemons to fill out the bin, and $12.50 for bin of oranges. I needed 12 bags of oranges in order to fill the bin, which was about 3 by 3 width and 3 feet high. It was a very difficult work to do. It also was back-breaking and risky when we had to climb the ladders to reach oranges and lemons. We fell many times and some workers got injured so bad. Nowadays, I have back problems because of many years working in the agriculture. Moreover, 7 years ago, I had an accident at my former work and I hurt my back, and they found out that I have not only a herniated and pinched nerve disc, but also degenerative and osteoporosis in 2 other discs. I remember the hardest thing was packing corn when I left a job with my brothers. I put bandages around my fingers and wore plastic gloves, but even like that, my hands bled every day. But I had to use them for the next day for work. They will bleed and hurt every day. I had trouble feeding myself because it came to a point when I couldn't even hold a spoon with my hands. Thinking about how difficult and risky at the same time, how essential this kind of work really is, it's so underpaid. Unfortunately, this continues to be the same way today. On top of all, we face another difficulty. The Border Patrol, or better known as La Migra, was always after us, and they will catch us and deport us. We lived in constant fear. I remember being fearful even of the Pacific Bell bands because they had the same white and greenish colors of the Border Patrol cars. All we wanted to do was to work. We never engaged in any criminal activity or got in trouble with the police. I was not afraid of getting my job done, but very afraid of the Border Patrol. While working with my brothers, we were deported to Tijuana, Mexico about 4 times. I remember the Border Patrol agents taking away our lunch and eating it right in front of us, knowing that we were hungry, and mocking and laughing at us, saying it was delicious. We suffer so much with this, not only with the U.S. Border Patrol, but also with the police in Tijuana, Mexico, who would stop us, take us to an empty field, search us, and then steal all the money we have with us. It was very scary on both sides of the border. When we crossed, it was at nighttime, and we were hungry and very cold. Every time that I was deported, I chose to cross the border again and come back because it was the only option to survive in my life. I found out about the packing jobs, and I decided to go packing green squash, later on the corn. It was very difficult because I had to stand on my feet for long hours, but I learned to pack fast. They paid about 10 to 15 cents per box, so I put a lot of effort and worked quickly. I packed up to 500 boxes daily and earned more money. There were days that we had so many orders and we had to work up to 14 hours with no breaks, no food. At the end of my shift, I remember feeling dizzy and weak. Sometimes I didn't even know where the building exit was. It was a difficult job too, but at least I never saw the immigration agents on my way to work, and that was a relief for me. At least I didn't have to worry about that. I worked for 7 months so I could save money to bring my children with my kids. And with my kids here, I had to work even harder because agriculture is seasonal. I had to work different jobs. For example, when it rains, you can't work and therefore you don't earn money. So I had to take different jobs. I worked mornings as a packer, and at night I worked a second job cleaning offices. In 1987, we got great news. President Ronald Reagan gave the amnesty to all the undocumented immigrants and permits the ones in the agriculture job. I qualified to get legalized and my kids as a family unit. This was such a relief for me, and had such a huge impact in my life, and I was so grateful to President Reagan that I named my only son Ronald after him. No more deportation for me or fear for the police or Immigration Border Patrol. The terrible fear that I had experienced for years ended for me. The fear that I went through is the same fear that immigrants still experience today. Even though now I am a US citizen, I feel a lot of compassion for all undocumented immigrants that are living in this country because I have been in the same situation that they are in now. I pray to God for them because they crossed the border for the same reasons that I once did. They come escaping poverty and violence. They come seeking an opportunity and a better life for them and for their family. Becoming a US citizen allowed me to finally leave the packing job. After years of working 2 daily jobs, I applied for a job as a custodian at Nordstrom, working the night shift. I was 27 years old then, and while my kids were in school, I started to doing some of the things that I wanted to do for a long time. I started taking English classes in the morning. Later on, I took my citizenship classes and passed the test. Moreover, I attended community college to get an associate degree. From being a student, I then became one of the administrators in the community college. Even though I didn't complete the 3rd grade, finally that 11 years old girl whose parents took out of school and was deprived from getting an education so that she will help with domestic labor could now pursue the education that she always wanted. I still remember my scratching, bleeding hands that had some parts where the skin had been peeled off. Those hands that helped me grab those lemons, oranges, and avocados, and then the corn in my agriculture work days fed me and helped me rescue my kids just when I needed the most. It seemed like a long time ago, but the farmer workers' conditions, unfortunately, haven't changed much since then. Most pickers and packers are still undocumented, have no legal status. It's ironic because they are considered essential workers and still get paid very low wages. They are on the front lines in this pandemic, even at higher risk because they can't afford to stop working. They also live together in small spaces, so if one gets sick, all going to get sick. They have no health insurance, no savings, benefits, or any kind of support, just like I never had. Today, I look at my hands and think, what would I have done without them? When I go to the grocery store, just like everybody else, I simply reach out and grab lemons, oranges, and avocados with my hands, no picking, no scratching, no turns, no bleeding, no trembling, no pain, no packing. And when I grab the fruit and vegetables with my hands, it feels so effortless. And I think, how many things in life do we take for granted without knowing what's behind it or who's behind it? Make it all possible for me and for everybody else. So please remember my story, as it speaks also about those immigrants, agriculture and farm workers who perform this hard work for us. Without them, we will have no food on our tables. Thank you.
Thank you, Elfega, for your story. Our third storyteller is Jesus Salcido. Jesus is a UT grad student and a hip hop recording artist. So let's welcome Jesus.
Hi. Thank you guys for sharing your stories. I'll get right into it. I was born in Chihuahua, Mexico, to teenage parents. My dad was 16 and my mom was also 16. When I was 7, they decided to move to the United States. And sometimes people ask why, and I told them, like, I didn't know at the time, But now I found out it was similar to Claudia. There was a lot of cartel problems. My dad had always wanted to be a cop growing up, and so he became one. And he faced a lot of scary threats. And it got to the point where he didn't feel comfortable being out in public with us at the park without having a gun on him at all times, because, that's how things are in a cartel town. So, my parents at the time were in their early 20s, so they decided, that they wanted to take a risk, and they had their whole lives ahead of themselves. So they took me and my sister to Euless, Texas, and we crossed in a bus, passenger bus with tourist visas. We didn't have anything. We just had some clothes, and had to stay with family in a very cramped apartment, 7 years old, sleeping on the floor. Of course, as soon as I got there, the school that I went to had no ESL. So I struggled a lot. I didn't know any English. I didn't understand anything. Kids would make fun of me and mock me. We didn't have a car, so we had to walk miles to school, But that's the one thing that they always ingrained in me, was education. You can always move forward with education. I can tell you that I didn't want to be in the United States. If it was up to me, I would have stayed in Mexico. Like, if you asked 7-year-old Jesus what I would have done, I would have stayed. But those things were out of my control. So we moved to Fort Worth, Texas, soon after we moved to Euless. And I started trying to make the best out of my situation. Even as a 7-year-old, I remember thinking, I need to hide who I am so I can fit in. That's the best thing that I need to do. I need to make sure that people did not know that I was an undocumented immigrant from Mexico. No teachers, no classmates, friends, nobody should know. That was a secret, and I worked so hard to master the English language. I remember thinking, I need to get rid of any accent that I have, while speaking English. That way, like, nobody would suspect, that he's from a foreign country, from Mexico, So I would just watch so much English TV and read, do my homework, just master the language. I remember something also that was very influential as I was growing up was watching the local Spanish news. Because, you see the deportation rates that they're reporting about. And, I remember every Saturday, they had an immigration attorney live on the show, and people could call in and, ask questions. And that's how I learned all that I know about immigration, just by watching the news as a kid. I learned things that were going on. I remember when Texas stopped giving out driver's licenses to undocumented immigrants, and my dad was so upset. And that's really when my deep fear of the police started, because, you could get pulled over and be deported. There was just this deep fear of the police just deciding to take it upon themselves to turn you in, I remember seeing an ICE van one time with my dad, and he pointed at it and he said, that's a nice van, always be on the lookout for those vans, like always be, like he called it abusado. So like always be looking out, I grew up a little bit, and, like many other immigrant children or children of immigrants, I essentially became my family's attorney because I had to fill, and translate apartment leases, school documents, bank paperwork, any mail. I had to call the apartment maintenance on behalf of them if something was wrong. Had to call DirecTV whenever they were charging us extra or something didn't make sense to my parents. I had to call Wells Fargo when they were scamming both of my parents. And that's super stressful for an 8-year-old, 8 to 10-year-old, like always be having to deal with adults that don't take you seriously, So I started feeling a lot of resentment towards my parents for making me do that. And like school became my sanctuary. It was a place where I was beginning to fit in and make friends now that I learned English, I became more comfortable as I grew older. By middle school, I had the whole act mastered, I would claim Fort Worth as my hometown, and I thought, maybe I belong now, like I lied to myself, and I still had that, dirty secret that I was undocumented inside me, and I still lived in fear, but I was very good at hiding that. You fast forward to high school, and you would look at me on paper, and I was thriving. Soccer team, I was in theater, I was class president, had friends, I did really well academically, near the top of my class, but I could only run away so much from being undocumented because, by the time my friends were 16 and 17, they started to get part-time jobs. They started to get their driver's licenses. They would fill out their FAFSA applications, and they would apply to colleges and scholarships, and they would always be asking me, hey, why aren't you applying? Like, why don't you have a car? Why don't you drive? Why don't you have some part-time work so you can start earning some money, And I would always make up excuses, I tried. Like, I thought that I could somehow get help to get into college, and I would go online and every application for scholarships, requirements, U.S. permanent residence or U.S. citizen every time. I even tried filling out the FAFSA once, and I remember seeing it is a federal crime to turn this in if you are not eligible, So you just get really discouraged because, all those things that my friends were doing, I couldn't legally do, and I didn't bust my butt studying, doing so much homework, following what my whole family told me to do, following education only to be breaking my back, and like not following my heart and my dreams, So like all I wanted to be was just a normal citizen, but still even then in high school, as things were supposedly going right, I still didn't belong, and I still didn't really exist to the country. I didn't have any documents, any valid IDs, no social security number, so I struggled when it came to figuring out college. Senior year of high school was hard. I didn't know how things worked out. So, I visited the University of Texas, and I just was really liking the campus, but deep down I knew that I still had no shot at getting in just because of this problem, and like I was so stressed that finally, I was talking to a counselor, admissions counselor at UT, and I just broke down and I said, you know what, like I essentially confessed to her, like, this is my situation, like I'm undocumented and like I don't know what to do, and that was the first time that I told anybody. you know, and so just trusting a stranger. And luckily there was a loophole at UT. I call it a loophole, but now because of Claudia, I know it's the 1403 a bill or whatever. And I qualified as an international student to UT, but I would have to sign an affidavit saying that I lived in Texas, so I qualified for in-state tuition. You know, so you get happy that you bought 4 more years. You know, like you're like, maybe Obama will do something. You know, like maybe the administrations will do something. You know, maybe, you know, somehow I still have time. You know, I still have time to figure things out. I was wrong. College was the hardest part of everything. You know, I had to still pay my rent. You know, my parents couldn't afford to support me at all. So during the summers, I would work remodeling houses with a dad's friend, building fences outside in the blistering Texas summer heat, getting home, being exhausted, you know. Then I worked at a pillow factory, you know, in a warehouse with no air conditioning, you know, 60 plus hours a week at 19 for low wages, just to try to save money to, you know, live while I was going to school. You know, I used to, because of housing costs, I used to drive back and forth 3 hours a day to go to school. Because I didn't have to have the money to pay rent at once, you know. So 2 years of college passed, same thing, wouldn't tell anybody, you know. I still was scared and fear, you know. And then Donald Trump gets elected, and then November 10th, 2 days after he was elected, I felt like I came out of the shadows, and I was like a new person, you know, because we had a class and all we did was vent. Everybody was venting about how much they didn't like Donald Trump. We didn't do any lectures or anything. But nobody had mentioned anything about immigration, and I just was bursting, you know. And I finally said, you know, like, I'm scared for my people. My professor responded, said, who are they? And I said, people like me and my parents who are undocumented. And I remember the whole class was feeling so awkward and uncomfortable. And like, it was just, I felt betrayed in a way, you know, because they're supposed to be my UT brethren, you know. You're supposed to be there for each other. But no, like, even after all these years, I still knew that I didn't belong. But this time, I didn't care. You know, because ever since that day, I feel like I've regained like pride and humanity. You know, like, now I get to tell stories, making hip hop music, you know, in my language for my people, you know. And unfortunately, you know, 17 years have passed, and still nothing has changed. You know, things are getting worse, and you know, immigrants are literally feeding the country during this pandemic. Yet there are still those locked up in cages and in detention centers, you know. Like, families are being separated, people are being deported. Like, we are essential workers, yet we are still terrorized, you know. And I love storytelling. That's what I do in my music. But action is just as important, if not more, and action needs to be taken. And so I just want to say to please support organizations like Grassroots Leadership and Austin Sanctuary Network. Find them on social media. Please support us. Support us in the struggle, you know. And I want to thank Representative Goodwin for this platform. And I hope that you, Representative, will join us and being an ally, and that you will, and that your constituents will join you in being an ally to us.
I forget to unmute myself. Thank you, Jesus, for your story. Our next storyteller is Sandra Garcia. Sandra is an entrepreneur. She and her husband flip homes after she retired from state government work. Let's welcome Sandra.
Ready? Hi. I just wanted to share a little bit about my story. Sometimes I go on a car ride or wherever I'm going, and I hear an old song from Juan Gabriel on the radio, and it makes me, oh my gosh, and it makes me so sad because I think of my little sister Elsa when she was little, and I'm gonna make her cry when she sees that. She would sing to us while we were working in the fields. She would always sing to us, and she was little. My parents, both of my parents, me and my younger sister were born in Mexico. I was a farm worker along with them for 9 years. My little sister would memorize songs while we worked in the fields, and she stayed in the truck. In the sun, she entertained herself with dirt, and but she would sing to us, and she would charge us $0.25 for every song that she memorized. And she would walk with us until she got tired, and then she'd just sit right in the middle of the fields until we came back. Bless her heart. I mean, back then it was good memories, you know, to hear her sing. She loves to sing. She still sings. But it's so sad that, you know, that my parents had to see the child that she was, so little. But we did what we had to do. My dad would always, when we were growing up, my dad would always say, and you tell people, don't be embarrassed, you tell people all the places that you visited. Tell them you've been to Colorado, to Montana, to Michigan. And he said, just don't tell them you went out there to work in the fields. You know, just don't tell them, like we would be embarrassed. We were not embarrassed. We worked in Colorado many, many times. In Michigan, we mostly worked in Michigan, Montana, West Texas. We worked in the fields 6 days a week, 10 hours a day, every day. And sometimes we didn't know any better because we were children, we were young, but we would pray for rain. I know my parents didn't like it when it rained because we didn't get paid, but it was a little break for us. Just, you know, we would see clouds and it was like, oh Lord, please let it rain a little bit. So we would go home a little early. That was 6 days a week. Sunday was for church. Go to the laundromat, go buy groceries. It was a lot of work. I don't know how we were able to work 10 hours. Very hard work. Your body, you can't imagine how your body hurts. There's so many blisters in your hands. I mean, blisters, and then they would pop and you still had to continue working. And the sunburns, major sunburns that we would come back with. I mean, it was just unbelievable how your body can recuperate from the blisters, from the sunburns, but it did. We worked on sugar beets, beans, we picked cherries, we picked cucumbers. And cucumbers was one of the worst jobs ever. I love cucumbers. And I remember every time we picked cucumbers, the first couple of days, my mother would help me. She would push me down in the toilet because your back kind of gives out. And you can't even sit in the toilet. But then your body gets used to it, you know, and you carry on, you know, because that's what you have to do. There were so many of us that go buy groceries, like me. I go to the H-E-B and I pick cucumbers and I pick oranges and cherries and this and that. And we go through it like, but don't even realize, you know, what it took for somebody to put that in our stores, you know, in our tables, you know, how we feed our children and our families. It takes somebody to do that, to be able to appreciate. And every time I pick a cucumber, I swear to God, my back hurts. I swear, I feel it. And I remember my poor mother, that she had to do that because we couldn't sit in the toilet. I still love cucumbers. I still love them, and I still eat them. I'll continue to get them for the rest of my life. But being a migrant worker, you don't get treated like a human being. I mean, you don't. You get treated like people are above you. You know, you're beneath them. I remember a truck in Montana. We were working on the fields, and a truck passed by, and it was me and my sister and my mom and my two aunts, and we were kind of working side by side, and a truck yelled at us and called us horse. And I'm like, horse? Like, I didn't understand. And I'm thinking, oh my God, you know, what did they think we were? You know, we were working, we were trying to feed America. But that's now. Back then, I just thought I didn't understand. And while we worked in the fields, the farmers were constantly spraying pesticides while we were working there. I mean, no consideration to, you know, us being there, and we were kids, and the airplanes would come and spray above us, and didn't even think twice about it. We didn't know any better. I mean, we had to work. And there were no bathrooms ever provided. I flip homes, like she said, and the first thing that we do is provide a porta potty, you know, for people that go work. But for us, there was nothing. There was no bathroom. And it was horrible being a girl and also being on your period. It was the worst. We would get so excited when we see cornfields. I still see cornfields, and that feeling that I get is like, oh my God, that there was a place that you could go and, you know, you had to wait for it to grow, but that you could hide and they wouldn't see you go to the bathroom. It was, I mean, I still see the cornfields, and it's like, oh my God, I remember that. There was also a farmer in Michigan, and I'll never forget his name because we worked for him for so many years. He wanted to buy me. He told me, ask your dad how much money he would want to purchase me. I couldn't believe it. And of course I asked my dad. My dad was so upset. I mean, he couldn't believe it. He said, I'm never gonna work for him again. I'm like, you know, it's like no big deal. You know, like now I think, oh my God, that was horrible. But I just told him, I'm not for sale. I'm not for sale. You just don't get treated. I don't know. I don't know what the mentality is of some people, but you're a human being and you're trying to feed, you know, you're trying to feed America, but you don't get treated like that. I remember a farmer in Montana. He placed us in a home that was right next to cows. There was a lot of cows that he had, and there were so many ticks. I mean, they were all over the house. They were all over. I remember at night, we would stick cotton balls in our ears to make sure that they didn't go inside our ears. But that's what he gave us, and that's, I mean, we took it. We took it. You didn't have a choice. But prior to being a farm worker, my parents, me and my sister, we lived illegally in East Texas in San Antonio, in fear. I was little, but I remember being so scared. I remember looking through the windows. I would hear a car and I would look through the windows. I didn't really understand, but I knew I was scared. I remember living in a garage with my parents. We slept on the floor. And then my dad got, I guess, caught by immigration, and they sent us back to Mexico. It wasn't hard for us to cross the river because we lived next to the river. So we used to cross it for fun. And then we came back to the United States, but as resident aliens. I was 9 or 10 years old when I was working the fields, and they would list me as having 13 years old, because when you're 13, you get paid as an adult. But that also meant I had to work as hard as an adult. I was 9 or 10, but I worked 10 hours a day. I don't know how. I can't imagine my children now doing that. But we did it. But the good thing is they were always as a family. My parents were very good. We just wanted to buy a house. We just wanted to have a better living. Never got in trouble, never did anything illegally. We just worked hard. And even when we got back home, we'd go to school, and on the weekends, if I wanted to buy shoes or a dress or something, I would go work on the weekends. I'd get on a bus in a little town in Eagle Pass with a whole bunch of men that would leave like at 5 o'clock in the morning, and we'd go work in the field so I could make some money so I could go to the movies or something. So I that's all I knew how to do, work hard. When I left Eagle Pass, I was 18 years old. And my dad used to always say, never, ever, ever marry a migrant worker. They will bring you back. You know, you guys need to study. Of course, he had, 3, 4 girls. Y'all need to study and, get an education. Don't ever, ever come back over here. This is not what you want to do with your life. Study so that you never come back. He was always, always pushing us. And, we spent so much time working in the fields together that, we would hear him. And he would always tell us how important it was. And, that he feels so sorry that we had to work in the fields. And my mom was the one that pushed. She's like, they're fine. They're not dying. They can do it. But my dad was always pushing education. And thank God my 2 sisters graduated from St. Edward's, and they've done really good. We've all done really good, but it's helped so much that we worked hard and know the value of living. And for years, my parents became a U.S. citizen years and years ago, and they would ask me, it's like, why don't you become? And I'm like, why do I have to pay? I shouldn't pay. I said, I've been, reporting on my Social Security since I was 9 or 10. I said, now I have to pay for an application. I've never been arrested. I have no tickets. I worked for the state government for 31 years, and I still have to pay. I couldn't understand. Well, that was dumb of me to think that. I'm a U.S. citizen now because I need to vote. I need to vote for another president because I'm very happy with this one, and my fault too, because I feel that I haven't contributed to voting, so I haven't had any voice. But now I do, and I can't wait to vote. In the winter of this last year, I was talking to my sisters, and I told them, I said, I want to rent a house this summer, and I want to take my kids, and I would take your kids, and I would take your girls and take them to work in the fields. And they're like, really, you would do it? I said, it's going to kill my back, and it's going to kill whatever. I said, but I want them to know what it takes to work in the fields and appreciate what some of these people are doing for us and how they get treated. I wanted my children to understand, to humble themselves, because they don't need to work. But I wanted them to maybe get discriminated, to get treated like we got treated, so they can think differently of how the rest of the world might think. I want them to know that, because a lot of us don't know what it takes to be a migrant worker and how to be treated, how you treat it different. And then the virus came in and kind of messed up my plans, but I'm still going to do it. The first chance I get, I'm going to rent a house somewhere, and I'm going to take my kids, and everybody who wants to send their kids, I will take them, and I will get them to work, and I will get them to know what it feels to feed America. Thank you for listening to my story.
Thank you, Sandra, for your story. And our next and final storyteller is Patty Torres. Patty is an entrepreneur. She's a leader in her Bastrop community and a mother of 5. Please let's welcome Patty. You have to unmute unmute Patty. Patty, you have to unmute your microphone.
Sorry. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining. I am the voice of many immigrants out there that are struggling to survive in this country. When Donald Trump was elected for president, I remember the day my kids came home terrified because students were harassing them saying, your mother is going to be deported. I tried not to cry in front of them and in front of my children, and I assured them that I will be fine and safe. They were so worried because they had already experienced past emotional trauma. I told them, you know, we trusted God and God will protect me. They were constantly worrying that their mom would be snatched away. They often felt fear and anxiety. I was born the 13th child to 2 Mexican parents. Before I turned 1, my mother fled Mexico to the United States. She came to California, where my older siblings lived. Life was hard in California. My family all worked in agriculture. I remember there was a series of immigration raids across the city. Sometimes my older siblings would be deported. My entire family were devastated and unstable until the immigration signed into law by Ronald Reagan on November 6th of 1986. And around 3 million immigrants were legalized, including older siblings. This was such a relief for the entire family. I remember reading this quote from Ronald Reagan, and it said, the problem of illegal immigration should not therefore be seen as a problem between the United States and its neighbors. Our objective is only to establish a reasonable, fair, orderly, and secure system of immigration into this country, and not to discriminate in any way against particular nations or people. My mother and I came to Texas when I was 14 years old. This was the first time I really encountered prejudice and racism. I remember my first days in middle school were so hard. One day during lunch, I was sitting down with a group of girls and I was trying to establish a friendship when all of a sudden I was harassed by one American girl who presumed I was an illegal Mexican. I soon became ashamed of my Mexican heritage, and I was fearful that I would not be accepted by others. And I often told people I was born in California. With deep roots in the United States, it feels a little bit like I've been here since I was 10 months old, and my first steps were in American soil. This is the country I call home. I was living in fear of my family being torn apart from my children's father, who was undocumented, and my worst fear came true. On July 8th of 2013, I was preparing our little 2-day trip. We were going to a water park that morning, and I went outside to water my plants when I saw my children's dad driving up the driveway, but I also noticed a car pulling up right behind him, and it was ICE. They got out of their car before he could even park, and I surrounded the car, pointing guns at him and demanding him to get out with his hands up. That's when I had my first ever panic attack. My heart began beating so hard and fast, and I thought, oh my gosh, this is a nightmare, you know, what's happening? And my 4 kids came out from the house and watched how their father was detained by ICE agents. I was horrified. I felt hopeless. Oh, it's been several years now, but it still hurts. I felt hopeless, and like all I could do was just come for my children. He was taken away, and we were left with the van full of luggage for a trip we couldn't make. He was deported to Mexico, and I was left with a full house to support and a welding business to run. Sometimes I felt like giving up because it was just too much to handle. But I found strength in the Lord to continue and to never give up. Unfortunately, my relationship with their father ended because I had to make really hard decisions. My kids' future was my priority, and they would have a better life, a safer life here. And to live in a foreign country could greatly reduce the education opportunities. And it was a high risk to take due to problems we are facing today, and like human trafficking, the organized crime, fight drug-related violence, unlawful killings of civilians. I mean, it's just horrible. And we should be keeping families together and tearing them apart. Nothing is more heartbreaking than to live with the crippling fear of losing a parent to deportation and having their families ripped apart, as it would cause extreme hardship within the family. The night our president was going to be elected, we were all so anxious to know, but it was getting very late, and I told my children to go to sleep. And I could sense that fear all over them as they went to bed. And the next morning, after Trump was elected for president, my children's first question was, who's our president? And they weren't that happy, but scared to go to school that day. Students at my son's school began to talk about how Trump was going to get rid of all the Mexicans. My son told me that to stay quiet. So people began to say racist comments in public places and in school. I remember one time two white men approached me in the street while we were protesting the day of One Day Without Immigrants. And I was asked, why don't Mexicans work hard in their own country? Why don't they just wait in line to come legally like everyone else? Why support them when millions of Americans are unable to find work? As if entering the U.S. legally was, it's a possibility. I mean, we would have done this without hesitation, and no one would choose to spend years hiding in the shadows, living never knowing what tomorrow holds. So despite common misconceptions, entering the country legally is next to impossible. We have limited options to a pathway to citizenship for undocumented workers. I myself have been waiting in line for over 20 years for my immigration interview to finalize my permanent residency. It's very easy to judge people in a situation that you have never faced, and easy to form an opinion on an issue when it does not directly affect you or your family. But thank God, soon I discovered I had the strength to run a business, raise my kids, and make a life. Over time, I stopped living in fear and instead felt more and more pride for my Mexican heritage. I taught my children to be proud of their history. If you ask my kids who they are, they say Mexicans, even though they were born here in the United States. They are proud of their Mexican heritage. I also taught them we can't live in fear. And I like this verse in the Old Testament where we can find numerous scriptures where God was very specific to the Israelites on how to treat the foreigners. And Deuteronomy 10:18 and 19, it says, he defends the cause of the fatherless and the widow and loves the foreigner residing among you, giving them food and clothing. And you are to love those who are foreigners, for you yourselves were foreigners in Egypt. The Bible tells us that the Lord is loving and compassionate towards all he has made. The Lord demands that we not only love mercy and deeds of compassion, but also that we do justice for the needy. We must reflect God's love and will. How many say amen? I am a dreamer and I am here to stay. I'm here to pursue the American dream. I change for lives of millions working to build a life in the land we call home. And I want to share something that I grew up singing this song in elementary school. I don't know if you recall. It's called This Land Is My Land. And I want to invite my children. They're a little shy of the camera. Ready? This land is your land. This land is my land. From California to New York Island. From the Redwood Forest to the Gulf Stream waters. This land was made for you and me. This land is your land. This land is my land. From California to the New York Island. From the Redwood Forest to the Gulf Stream waters. This land was made for you and me. Thank you.
Thank you, Patty.
You're welcome. Thank you, everyone.
Patty, and thank you all of you for sharing your story. There's an activist leader who faces a hearing and the fear of deportation, but still risks herself with her work every single day. She's a human being. There's a teenage girl who picks lemons and oranges to be able to feed herself and to save money to rescue her children. She's a human being. There's an 11-year-old who dreams of school and longs to study and hurries up with her domestic chores to run to school. She's a human being, and she's not invisible. There's a 7-year-old boy that wants to hide who he is and wants to get rid of any kind of accent, and he wants to master the English language. He's a human being. There's a college kid who doesn't belong, who translates for his father, who doesn't speak or understand English, also a human being. There's a girl that is happy when she goes to work in a cornfield because those fields are the only ones that have restrooms. She's a human being. There are children, US citizen children, that fear the leader of our nation, separating them from their own mother. There's a family that has been split up. They're all human beings. And there's a woman that alongside her children sings a song of a land we all call home, all wanting the same things: opportunity, safety, and protection and provision for our families. All human beings just like us, all of us. This reminds us that we are more than politics and rhetoric, that we all want the same things. And that's what we felt here today, that we all want the same things. We are living in times like no other in the coronavirus pandemic that has shown us how dependent we are on one another. We are living in times where we've seen how much we rely on essential workers, and we get to see who those essential workers are now. All of those people that have been invisible in our eyes, the ones who pick and pack our food, who prepare our food, who feed us, who build our homes, our roads, who clean and disinfect hospitals and buildings, who care for our elderly and vulnerable. I want to thank again State Representative Vikki Goodwin for having us, and each one of you brave storytellers, Claudia, Elfega, Jesus, Sandra, and Patty. Thank you for your time, courage, and vulnerability. And I want to leave you with this. If we are able to be here today because a state representative listened to her constituents, she attended an immigration workshop, she saved a postcard and followed through with her commitment. And today she hosted us and provided a platform to have our voices heard. And I want to challenge and encourage you who are listening and watching to call, email, text, whatever it takes, to your own representative to host us, to provide a platform for these stories. These are the stories that we need to listen to, that can teach us to break down walls and come directly from the people that are impacted and that expose a system that is obviously broken and that desperately needs fixing. A long overdue immigration reform that respects human rights and eliminates inequities, and you can help change that from your very own home. So who's next? I want you to visit us at Undocumented Stories on our website, theundocumentedstories.org. And I challenge you, who's next? Thank you.
Sorry, I was trying to unmute myself. Thank you. Thank you all so very much. Your stories are amazing. The difficulties you've had to overcome through your lives it's heartbreaking, but also heartwarming to hear where you are now. I hope that one day people will treat other human beings with more respect, to pay people a living wage for the work that they do, the backbreaking, hand-hurting work that they do in the fields, so that we can eat. I really appreciate you sharing your very personal stories and letting us have some idea of how hard it is when you come to America, and the fear that you go through, and so many challenges that you have to get past. And thank you all for taking the time tonight. I will hope that some of our audience members will also do the same sort of storytelling event for their circles of friends. And the more people here, the better. So I wish you all the very best. I will do what I can in my role as state legislator to have other legislators recognize we're all human beings. We need to treat other human beings with dignity and respect. You know, there should be bathrooms when you're in the fields picking food. There should be education without barriers, you know, living wages for the work that you do, no matter where you come from. So thank you all for sharing your stories. Good night.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.